Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. We have a visitor who has already been on our channel once before. The journalist. He lives in the Washington DC area and he has ancestry that runs way back, so far back that he is part of the family that or Suriratna princess who had migrated to South Korea. So we are going to be hearing from him a lot about this connect and also how it translates to current South Korea. So let's welcome Hoon Kim. Hoon, namaskar and welcome to P Guru's channel.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I apologize. I have the wrong overlay here. Let me just get rid of that 1 second. Sorry about that, guys. So hang on. My apologies. Hoon, we talked about this last time. We were on a different topic. We were talking about Hinduism and things like that, and you mentioned that you have ancestry that leads back to this. We can talk about that. You can tell us exactly how that is. But before, more importantly, you did a very successful event in Washington DC about the influence of Ramayana across Asia. Maybe you can touch upon a little bit of that, and then we can jump into our topic today, which is Princess Suriratna.
Thank you so much for having me again. It's always an honor to be on here. Well, to address your first question, the event in U.S. Congress, which was the Ramayana across Asia, took place with the hopes that the U.S. Congress would do their best to try to understand the influence of the Ramayana in the whole of Asian region, because the story itself has had a tremendous impact in building up the influences and the societal norms of so many countries around Southeast Asia, particularly, and beyond as well, as we have shown. It was all also conducted by our good friends in Hindu Action, particularly by our good friend Utsav Chakrabarti and all the other team, and it was successful because it was successful, but also at the same time extremely significant, given the fact that the Ram Mandir was going to be opening, and also at the same time it literally brought all these nations together to say, there are differences politically right now, but in a sense, in terms of our heritage, it only shows that we are one. So it was successful on multiple facets, both on a policy level, but on a heritage level as well.
Hoon, Korean web series are among the most popularly watched in India, especially on Netflix. Like Netflix has a fair amount of coverage content, and this is very popular in India as well as in the United States. I mean, I got hooked on. I gave it to my family. Everybody watches just about every web series that comes out because there's so much cultural connect. I mean, I love it. Especially there was this one thing about what is that? 15. Anyway, it's okay. The one that I really liked was called as Chief of Staff. Chief of Staff. The guy who was the progenitor there, protagonist, he's also in that new thing, that game that you have where people get eliminated.
Oh, Squid Games, right?
Yes, yeah, Squid Games, right? He was the main character in that one too, and it was so relatable. I mean, beautiful web series that they put out, and anyway, so this connect is increasing. I mean, that's how I found out that the names for calling your parents, like mom is Amma and dad is Appa. This is actually Tamil words that evidently one Tamil princess took back to South Korea. We talked about it the last time, but today we are going to talk about Suriratna. With your permission, I'll start the first slideshow, and you can start talking to that. Here we go.
Sure. Okay, so as you can see, we see. We see that there is a legend, right? And it is called only a legend because it just happened so long ago, and unfortunately, there's no set historical record in the world, except traces of it, both in Ayodhya in India right now, or as we call it also in the state of Uttar Pradesh, in the historical records of Korea, which is in the Korean National Museum today, and the book is called Samguk-yusa. So as you can see, we have the two figures there, and you know the beauty about it is this: is that we can actually see the heritage and the historical aspect of it from two different artworks, right? So you have the artworks of the traditional Korean artworks, which had a lot of which is in a sense you can call it one of the main identities of the East Asian culture as well. So you can look at through that lens, right? But also at the same time, as I will show you in a little bit, there are you know artworks actually presented through the Indian lens as well. So so this the two pictures as you see it right now, we actually call it we actually have a name for it, which is the king himself is called King Suro, and the other lady, as you can see, is Queen Suriratna, but to us she is the Queen He. So next slide, please. Thank you. So as you can see, this is basically the historical record or the book that sort of contains the traces of that period. It's called Samguk-yusa. This was a time when the Korean Peninsula, as we call it, way before North and South Korea, right, was actually formed into three kingdoms. The upper part of the Korean kingdom was called Goguryeo, and then the southern there were two other kingdoms within the south called Baekje and Silla. But we're actually going to talk a little bit about another kingdom that existed in around the province that I personally come from. So next slide, please. So, yes, so as you can see, I'll just read the slide because this is extremely fascinating. So according to Samguk-yusa, a 13th century Korean historical chronicle, which I would 100% recommend everybody to read because it just shows the foundational dynamics of the history of the Korean Peninsula for those who are interested in Korean history. So I really recommend you to do your research on that. But according to this historical chronicle, the India-Korea friendship began in 48 AD. So notice how I said it's a legend because it was so far long ago, and as you can see, it's since it happened around that time, the world in a sense was entering into another millennia, right? So there's a significance there, and when Princess Suriratna, or the precious gem, as we understand her to be, journeyed from Ayodhya, India, to Korea to marry King Suro, and subsequently became the Queen Hwang-ok, which is in Korean it means yellow jade of the Gaia kingdom. Now, do you remember me telling you there were three kingdoms initially?
Right,
But
right.
around that time, after the arrival of Queen Suriratna, there was another kingdom that was found in the province that I come from, which was called the Gaia kingdom, or in another translation, also known as the Kayak kingdom, like kayaks, right, in the river. So next slide, please. So what do the legends say? Well, I'll just give you the watered down summary version of it. So basically, what happened was Queen Suriratna's parents, who were kings in Ayodhya at the time, they fell asleep one day, and Bhagwan, as we call it, or God, or through our translation, they're shown as these the heavenly beings actually reveal themselves to the king and queen and told them that your daughter Suriratna, who was 16 years old at that time, needs to take a boat. From what we know, from what I and there were theories about this. Either she left from what we know as the Kolkata area or from Tamil Nadu. But in any case, take a boat, and I will guide her through her journey. And at the end of her journey, her husband will be waiting for her in a distant land. And so they woke up, and the other legends also goes that Queen Surya also herself had her own revelation about this. And the next day they prepared a boat, and they follow the sea coordinates, as we call it, or the guidance of Bhagwan, or the heavenly being, right, from India all the way into what we know as the Korean Peninsula today. And so it was, in a sense, a trip that involved a huge leap of faith, right? Because essentially you don't know where you're going, right? And look, and if you look at the geography of India at that time, it was surrounded by civilizations that were completely just they connected, but also at the same time foreign to each other. Much less just going all the way to a land that had initially no historical contact together, right? And so she went all the way to Korea, and at the end of her journey, a day before she arrived, the legend goes that King Suro apparently also had a dream, telling him that well, it's from the same heavenly being, or if from our translation, a foreign heavenly being that we were not aware of, telling him to go out into the by the beach and await for her arrival at a particular time with his entire entourage, because the wife that the heavens have prepared for you will be arriving. And and this was also significant because King Suro, according to the legends, were approached by so many court officials and military officials, family members, and so on and so forth, to marry somebody within his clan, within his area of influence. But King Suro, much like the decisions that he made at that time, he actually took his own stance and said, well, I have a feeling that I shouldn't get married for now. But when she arrived, it was just love at first sight, and apparently they were able to connect with each other. And shortly thereafter, Queen Suriratna became what we know as Queen Hoanghok, who ended up becoming the first Indian empress. Right, Gaya Kingdom was also, in a sense, an empire of its own. Of the Korean Peninsula, and so they had several children. I think up to like 6 or 7 children, and there were two last names that originate from that clan. Now, here's the thing: as you can see, my last name is Kim, right? And you'll say, okay, well, how's that different from the crazy dictator from up north, right? That threatens to kill everybody all the time. Well, here's the thing: just because you're a clan, just because you're a Kim, that doesn't mean that you belong to the same clan. My clan actually has been in the southern part of Korea since thousands of generations, probably since Adam and Eve, right? And so we have been there, and essentially what happened was, our clan actually kept the name Kim, but the line of influence, or the line of heritage actually wasn't lost. There were, and in one sense, there's not many of us left, but there are Kims that descend from that line. But also there are those with the last name Her, who also share the same heritage as well. And so it's a very fascinating story. And some say that there's a lot of questions as to if this is real or not. And so next slide, please.
Yes.
Yeah. So as you can see, there are so many people who and people of influence as well that share this heritage. One of them was the former president of Korea. We have a prime minister. We had a former prime minister who also shared this heritage, and the former first lady of the previous administration, the Moon administration, she also was the descendant of that. Of Queen Suriratna. And so as it happens to a lot of the official South Korean delegation visits to India, Yogi Adityanath actually prepares a special ceremony for all Korean delegation, especially for those who are descendants of Queen Suriratna, to come and just simply participate in being enamored by the heritage and the history of Ayodhya itself. Now, one thing to remember is that there is a bit of a debate whether or not it was actually in Ayodhya, as we know it today, in Uttar Pradesh, or it was in 2 other places. The other interpretation is that some say that the Ayodhya that was mentioned in this story is actually from Tamil Nadu, what we know as Tamil Nadu today. And you mentioned that we have very similar language similarities and all that. But also at the same time, the word amma and appa, right? It's in Tamil, but in the sense, if we say that, the word amma itself or amma is also spoken by those who speak Tibetan up in North India as well, right? So there's a lot of fascination there too. But there are other theories which it wasn't. And again, I personally I wouldn't back that up, but the other theory is that it essentially the Ayodhya was misinterpreted as Ayutthaya, and Queen Suriratna was originally actually from Thailand itself, and Samgukisa was actually written in the 1300s, not back in the 48 AD when she existed. But if you think about it, right, where does the word Ayutthaya in even in place like Tamil Nadu or even Thailand come from? Well, we know that it actually comes from Ayodhya originally, from what we know is the Ayodhya in Uttar Pradesh today. So I think it's only safe to say that Queen Suriratna was indeed from Ayodhya in Uttar Pradesh, and so there's a fascinating factor there. So next slide, please. Yeah, and so there are modern interpretations of it. I think you mentioned the Korean dramas. There were Korean drama called Kim Suro. Actually, it's the telling of King Suro, who created this whole kingdom and did all this stuff. He was actually a military general, by the way, as well. And we had a story of Queen Suriratna. Obviously, it wasn't by an Indian actress, but everybody sort of knew the idea of it. And now today, there are short cartoons that really tells the heritage of the story itself, but really they focus a lot on the beauty of the story, right? The leap of faith, the love at first sight, right? The divine decree, right? It's a marriage between the East Asian perspective with the South Asian perspective all those years ago. So anyone who's saying that, well, these are just two different worlds that really initially has no connections together. Well, I'll say just look again and see the story of Queen Suriratna. And so next slide, please. So there you have it. This is for those who want to research a little more about the story. Please go ahead. And again, this is a beautiful story of two worlds just coming together, right, with the divine leap of faith, and I would say through divine will. And so it also in final, I would say that the story shows that humanity, in a sense, is indeed one, right? And no matter what the differences are, whether religiously, politically, and whatnot. And so I think my heritage really showed that all those years ago, and that's the great lesson that we can keep all the way to the end. So thank you so much.
That's wonderful, Sehun. Couple of things that I wanted to add to what you said. Navigation in the early days, it is believed that India didn't have compass. There was no compass that would show you, but there is a special breed of monkeys. They call them Devangu or Devavak. It's a breed that is available. I mean, that's seen in Tamil Nadu, for example. Mm-hmm. And this monkey, no matter where, it will always sit facing north. So if you put these monkeys on the ship, they know that whichever direction the monkey is sitting is your North Pole. So their navigation aids were two, the stars and this. And they would only navigate when the ocean winds allowed you to go from east, from India towards to go east. And then they would have to wait 6 months to come back, because that's when the tide turns, the winds turn. Then they would again take, because this was all sails. There was no mechanized way to go there, right? The other legend that is very mentioned a lot in Indian folklore is that the merchants that went from India, when they would take spices, silk. Silk was the most important, most sought after, I guess, plus a lot of jewelry, jade, all precious stones and things like that. They would go from India, and then they would touch on all these ports all the way up to Japan. And the person who's selling. So what happens is it's like a barter. You go and give some precious stone, in exchange you get something back, and then the other person says, okay, next time you come, you bring all these things. And the person tells him that if I don't make the voyage the next time, my son will bring it for you. And they had established this reputation so well that they were considered the most trustworthy people, because they see the value. I don't know what language they conversed in. I mean, at least to the Midwest, I'm sorry, Middle East, they are supposed to have had a language called Mlecha. There was some amount of formalization under King Ashoka in 3rd century BCE, where he formalized a lot of things. But I don't really know what happened in this case. And my memory also is sketchy. But the point I think I'm trying to say is, trade existed as way back as in BCE. Now, Sehun, one thing I wanted to ask you today. We see a lot of traces of Buddhism in South Korea. I've traveled. I haven't had a chance to look at any Hinduism sites in South Korea. Are there any?
Well, we actually follow the Korean. Actually, the Korean heritage involves a heavy amount of Mahayana Buddhist influence in the
Yeah.
country, right? And it's also important to remember that it wasn't always, as you may have seen, Buddhism wasn't always influential in the country. Initially, what happened was, the Korean Peninsula itself was, and until this day, right now, was a very Confucian and Taoist focused nation. And so there were certain codes and certain beliefs that the Korean people actually followed. And when Buddhism actually initially came in, it actually went through a season of persecution, right? And so because it was seen as something that was foreign, something that wasn't compatible with the beliefs that existed at the time. But over the centuries, it began to catch interest among the elite, everywhere from the elite class all the way to the lowest of the low. And one thing to remember is that the temples itself, right, provided at certain times haven for those who were poor and didn't have anywhere to go, because they would take in those who were the lowest of the low to be monks. And that's how they were able to sustain and sustain themselves, and also at the same time flourish in Buddhism. I think the biggest influence and the officialization of the Buddhist presence in Korea came when Buddhism actually entered into the realm of politics. After a few centuries, you'll see kings and everyone from kings to military officials to even concubines, right, accepting Buddhism and really getting in touch with the teachings there. I think that's where we see the traces of Hinduism, because Mahayana Buddhism, in a sense, originated heavily from Hindu influence as well, right? And so we even see this within the Chinese Buddhism, and some of the legends within Chinese Buddhism. You see the remnants of the stories of Ramayana, although unfortunately under the communist government in China right now, a lot of that has been suppressed. But in Korea, I think, instead of just looking at it through a storyline, I think the teachings of Hinduism coming from the teachings of in the form of Buddhism is something that needs to be noted. And plus, there is certain theories that Sanskrit also had a huge influence around the Korean language, the formation of the Korean language. And plus, you have to remember, during the Mongol Empire, right, the Yuan dynasty, the empire actually allowed free travel within its realm, and so it's very possible that there were Hindu traders or Tibetan traders with trace of Hindu beliefs, right, coming in and out. There was even historical trait, the historical records of certain Korean traders or even politicians really marrying into people within the other realms. And so I think that's probably the best trace. Now again, in the modern times, you'll be very happy to know ISKCON is actually pretty vibrant in Korea, and there is from what I understand, a Korean Hindu guru actually that operates in South Korea right now. And so, um, but historically, I think it's safe to say that there are traces of Hinduism within Korea through the form of Buddhism. We're not like Japan, where I would say over 80% of the Japanese gods, for example, are actually in a different form of Hindu gods, right? And even from there, you see they come in forms of Shintoism and Buddhism and other things as well. So, yeah. It's a very complicated mix of baskets, but it's a hidden gem. It's all I'm trying to say.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And the thing that blows me away, Sehun, is that we pick up all these nuggets here and there. I'm not sure where the Korean script, which looks similar to Japanese and Chinese, I'm not saying it is. They are very significant different characters. I know. I've tried to make some sense of it. But see, the Khmer script, that is in Cambodia, they used to call it Champa Nagari. Champa is a flower, I guess, that was prevalent there. So again, this today's Myanmar was called Brahma Desa, land of Brahma. And so that became Burma under the British, and now they've gone back to the equivalent of in Burmese language. Now they call it Myanmar. The river that goes all through from China down to the delta through Laos, Thailand, and Myanmar, Mekong. Actually, one interpretation is it was as big as Ganges. So they call it Ma Ganga. So that Ma Ganga over period time, it became Mekong. So there is so many civilizational connect. The Khmer script, which is used in some languages, not all, is very, very close to it's derived. It has the same grammatical moorings as Sanskrit, today's Devanagari, which is what Hindi uses. And take any Indian language, there are 21 official languages. They all follow the same grammar. It may be written differently. So I had a specialist show me how from a particular thing called Brahmi script, which was a basis, from Brahmi all these things evolved. And he says about how, those days probably sculptors were sculpting it. If you accentuated a particular thing, like a cut or something like that, initially, whoever did that stayed for that region. That's how we have so many languages, but the culture in India is the same. Very interesting situation, because people speak different languages, but they all relate back to Rama. Rama is the same. Doesn't matter which corner you go to. So this binding influence that this Ram Mandir has brought about is, you have to see it to believe it. I heard it was amazing. People were celebrating it like they were celebrating Diwali, the festival of lights, which is considered the most celebrated festival for Hindus. So Sehun, thank you so much for laying it out for us and helping us understand the Korean culture. We have a few questions from our viewers, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Can I go ahead and ask them?
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, one moment, please. Messi fan, thank you for becoming a YouTube member. You are a big draw. Venkat Surya Murthy, thank you for becoming a YouTube member. And Atul Kumar Srivastava, thank you for becoming a YouTube member. All of you who have become members, you heard the original, the starting tune on Ram Mandir that I played. If you want to make it as a ringtone, you can download it from our site. You have to be a member. All those of you who are members, you can download that ringtone for free. Next question. GK wants to know, the second highest number of missionaries are from South Korea. What is happening in South Korea?
Well, okay, I'll say this. I'm a Christian myself, right? So, but it's in a sense, Korea is also an extremely spiritual country, and so as you may have heard, Buddhism was essentially a persecuted religion at first, right? But it flourished, right? It actually had a huge amount of influence, and in a sense, you should also know, Korean Buddhism also has a huge influence around the world. I mean, it attracts so many people. It attracts monks and lay people from everywhere, from the United States to Sri Lanka. There are actually Sri Lankan monks that all go all the way to Korea to train, from Nepal and everything else. And so, yeah, I mean, I think in any nation with a great Christian population, you'll see missionaries going forth and such. And so, in a sense, I'm sure to some, it's a very questionable topic. But despite this, I'll tell you this. Despite the beliefs, I think the more important thing about this story, and even just the connection to Ayodhya itself and everything that's going on in Ayodhya itself, is a sign that, although some of us may be Christians or Hindus or Buddhists or whatever it may be, our heritage always unites us together at the very least. And so, I think if that's a point of worry, I don't
No, it's just an observation. I wouldn't say
right.
it's a point of worry at
Right,
all.
right.
Not at all. And Sehun, see what is happening is, remember there was this place called Nalanda University, which the Bakhtiyar Khilji, a relative of Alauddin Khilji, burnt it down. It burnt for 3 months. Now, most of the scripts, texts were lost. This is 13th century. But interestingly, before that, many people from Tibet and other areas came to India. They understood this and they translated it into Tibetan. And they took back these texts back with them to Tibet.
Right.
Now, my good friend Rajiv Malhotra is actually funding a couple of projects to recreate the original Sanskrit manuscript from the Tibetan manuscript that are still preserved till today.
Mhm.
So at least people are trying to say, wait, let us find out what used to be there. And there are very few people in India even today who can read Prakrit and Brahmi and interpret that. So to give people a quick, faster one-liner about it, Prakrit is the precursor to Sanskrit. So Prakrit means nature. Sanskrit is refined nature. There is a guy called Panini who formalized the language. In fact, he did such a good job that Sanskrit is considered the best language to use if you want to use like a computer programming language. Of course, we all have to learn Sanskrit. Then we can program in Sanskrit. That becomes easy. So there are a few steps there.
Right.
So
yeah, and that's the beauty of it, right? Like, we are, in a sense, I think we entered into an era where we're searching for our heritage again. And I think that's a great journey to be on altogether. Yeah.
yes. Partha wants to know, with Asia pushing internal growth of economy, some claim ancient Chinese Buddhist temples are regaining visitors across Asia, including China and South Korea. Is this true?
Well, this actually has a huge political angle to it. The Chinese Communist Party actually has been ruthlessly campaigning for the whole Buddhist diplomacy, much like the Buddhist diplomacy that Prime Minister Modi actually engaged in initially from the beginning of his time in office. And so what they're trying to say is, well, look, we actually are united in Buddhism, in our shared heritage of Buddhism. And if you want to have better relations, I think we should do it. We should have a starting point from Buddhism itself. Well, firstly, the Chinese are essentially copying it from Prime Minister Modi's, or it seems strongly suggests that they're copying it from Prime Minister Modi's Buddhist diplomacy that he engaged in. But also, to answer your question, I don't think it's succeeding, and it's only succeeding on probably maybe on a political level, maybe on a I don't know, in certain individual temple politics, but overall, everyone knows that when it comes to Buddhism, it's India, it's South Asia, it's Nepal, it's in that area, because that's where Sakyamuni Buddha actually originated, right? And more importantly, people do you can't forget, Sakyamuni Buddha was a Hindu prince, right? And in certain parts of Hinduism, he's actually considered as a god. And so, I think in terms of the economic growth aspect of it, I think China it feels extremely threatened by the growth of India, because look, India is the only country with all of the similar aspects, like having the same population, all the way to having so many young people who are innovative and such, right? But although in China it's very suppressed, the CCP feels extremely threatened from my view, and they're trying to see if they can achieve the same amount of success that India did through this Buddhist diplomacy. And so thank you for that question. So for those who are aware, please don't fall for that that stupidity, and always remember where Buddhism or Hinduism actually originated, and which is what we know as India or the Greater South Asia region today.
Thank you. And in one of my books, I've actually captured Buddhism in China. There is an island called Hainan.
Mhm.
And just outside Hainan, there's just like, Empire State Building, not Empire, what the Liberty statue, just on a small island, Staten Island, right? So like that, there is an island, and that there is, I think, a three-headed Saraswati, from what I could make sense of. So these things still exist. People do go there and pray, even though you can say China is a communist state. There are people who do pray. There are some pockets. It is believed that the Falun Gong alone has close to 80 million followers in China. It's about 10%. I think another 10% are Christians in China. So it's all underneath, because communism is fairly, what do you call as Gnostic? That is, I don't know, atheistic. No religion in communism. That's what they try to teach you. That is overbearing there. Under some general secretaries, it is loosened a little bit, and then they go back and tighten it again. This is an exercise that has been going on for a long time. So we will wait and see, because the underpinning things never go away. That is the point. Shreyasta Samal wants to know, could you also highlight the present day scenario in South Korea and India, as some news highlights that present day South Koreans are more Americanized and lost touch with ancient history?
Well, I think it's that the question actually touches upon the effect of modernism, right? In the recent history, Korea went through, so many. So it's just in the 20th century alone, it went through so many events that it was personally involved in, right? The liberation from Imperial Japan, all the way to right after, 5 years after that, the Korean War. And everyone was just absolutely focused on how do we make ourselves better. You have to remember, in the 1950s, Korea's GDP was lower than that of Somalia, right? And we were getting aid from countries throughout the world, everywhere ranging from the United States all the way to Haiti, right? And so, and we remain grateful to all those countries, but but our main focus was, okay, how do we rise above and rise out of the ashes? And to answer your question, yes, there's a lot of Americanized influence, but in a sense, in a greater sense, there's a lot of the modern influence that took place in Korea. Now, the beauty of what we have now, though, is that since people do no longer, in a sense, largely have to worry about food or anything like that, in the level of our brethren up north, at the very least, people are sort of looking into this type of heritage. And again, being a millennial, I've had the privilege and the opportunity and the growing interest to look into my own heritage. A lot of my fellow clan members are the Kims of Kimei region. They don't really look into this stuff, right? And I'll tell you something really fun. In North Korea, from one of the escapees actually told me, is that everyone who shares the last name Kim identifies themselves either largely as the Kims of Kimei region, right? The descendants of Queen Suriratna. One of the only reasons is because a lot of those Kims actually share the same heritage as the Kims up north. The clan of the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, and in that country, it's actually forbidden for you to put yourself on that level. So they instead opted to identify with the Kims of Kimei. Whether they know about this story or not, I think it's irrelevant, right? So, as I said, Korea is a place where you see elements and hidden gems of everything, and so all you have to do is just dig it up a little more. And plus, to answer the other part of answering your question, I would say this is that that's not entirely true. There's a huge interest in the ancient histories of Korea. And personally, I would never have known about this whole Queen Suriratna story had my father not told me about it, or had I not even seen clips of it as a child of that the Korean drama poster that I just showed you. So I think the growth is definitely there. In terms of interest, I think practically the interest will grow a lot more as we see the economic rise of India and the continual influence that it has all over the world. And so, I'm extremely confident that the interest will be solidified and grow as much as possible in the future.
Thank you. And have you seen Vincenzo web series?
I have seen clips of it. It's a very it's a very violent drama from what I know, but it's very enjoyable.
But it's funny though. It's funny because I got to understand a lot of the version of Buddhism that is practiced in South Korea. Viewers, watch it. It's fun. It's mafia meets South Korea. What happened? But it's fun too. I liked it. I
It's
also
on
saw
Netflix, right?
Yeah, on Netflix, right? And the interplay between the characters and how Buddhism comes in and out of it. It was very interesting, I thought. Again, see, this is curiosity, Oh, wow. Culturally, South Korea as a family, right? They're very similar to Hindus. A Hindu family follows the same kind of tradition. Respect your elders, listen to them, don't go against them, don't do anything that would, incur their wrath. All those family values, they're all there. So it's like, you're watching a family next door. That's how it felt to me when I was watching that. The Chief of Staff is much more political. It is more like a political thriller. That's a different hue. But this one, Vincenzo and a few other series that I watched, they all have that family underpinnings, and it gives you a very quick connect with the story and the players. So it's very, very nice to see that thing. I really like the way the Korean web series are presented. So anyway, that's just me. Those of you who like it, do put in a comment. Next, go to the next question. Shrestha, again, what do South Koreans think of this ancient story? Are they open to Indians, or do they like Indian culture?
Well, the ancient story itself is unfortunately it's not as well known in Korea. If it's known, it's just viewed as, oh, it's a very interesting and a very beautiful story. But there is, though, recently there is through social media, of course, a lot more people have become aware of the story, and so I'm pretty sure that with the continual trend of the social media itself, people will take more interest in it. And so, in terms of being open to Indians and Indian culture, well, look, and by no means I want to use this as an excuse, but the Korean culture is a very it's a very homogenous culture. Although right now we see a bit of change now, right? So it's so many international visitors or international settlers, immigrants coming into South Korea out of interest to K-pop, to economic reasons, or even political reasons, right? Settling into the country. But even in there is a bit of challenges, right, in terms of accepting those from other countries, and of course there's definitely tensions that happen between the two people, but on the flip side, there are folks who are specifically becoming a lot more interested in India, right? And I would say this: the first time where I saw a major Korean figure being interested in Korea was a very, very famous monk. He was actually I came across this clip on YouTube years ago, where he said the best place to do a retreat, right, to experience the actual life itself, right, is India, because. And he said this: when you go to China, you can't find a single person who can speak English, let alone their ABCs, right? But in India, you can not only communicate, at least for a little bit, but you also see the beauty of smile, right? And the beautiful smiles of the people, even in places where situation is dire. And he said, that's and again, I personally saw that as in 2015 when I visited India. India is one of the only countries that I've seen that I'm convinced of that it actually has its problems outward. It's very transparent. Sometimes it's too transparent. Some would say, because of that, I think the strength itself is emboldened naturally even more, right? So it doesn't need to artificially push into it. And so as that grows, and as I said previously, when India by 2027, it's projected that India will be the third largest economy in the world. I personally think that it will probably be the second largest in the world. And with this economic impact, people will have to take notice and take interest in it. And look, you're seeing the first case study, right? And not only because I shared this heritage, but through research, through thorough research and thorough interactions, and thanks to a lot in part to my Tibetan friends, I really, and I'll say this, I really discovered the Bharat inside of me, right? And I'm sure there's a lot more people in the future in Korea and all over East Asia.
Viewers, if you have not listened to K-pop, do listen to it. It's very melodic, just like Indian music. And my daughter introduced me to K-pop 15 years ago or 10 years ago. I love the music. And also, I was in a mall in Seoul. I think it was 2000s, early 2000s, maybe 2004 or 2005, something like that. And guess what music was playing on the complete system for the entire mall, right? They were playing Daler Mehendi. This guy was a very popular singer, and he's actually from US or Canada. I don't remember exactly, but his music was all over the place. I said, "Wow, out here we can listen to Daler Mehendi." So there is there's a connect because the music, the styles, all those are very, very similar. So we have to just rediscover all these things, for a greater understanding and for a better world. Last question for you, Sehun, before we wrap up. We've been talking for 45 minutes. I don't know if you realized it. I mean,
time flew by.
Chaitanya Takle wants to know, I'm studying Hangul. The syllables from the same origin from the vocal cord, e.g. ka and ga, look similar. Is it a coincidence?
Well, I believe that humanity originated from one source in the beginning, and so maybe that has to do with it. But on more of a serious note, I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't think it's a coincidence that languages have similarities across Asia, and the Hangul itself was actually created in order to separate the Korean people away from using just Chinese characteristics, and because of the Confucian influence in the in history, even a lot of the Buddhist texts, as you may see if you go to Korea, it's in Chinese characters. And so there was a king that came out couple of hundreds of years ago, King Sejong, as we call him. He's actually there's a huge statue of him in the middle of downtown Seoul, right in front of the palace, the old palace, where you should also go visit if you can. Very beautiful place. There's a golden statue of him just sitting there like that, and he's the creator he's the developer of Hangul. It's a lot of people say it somehow has a connection to Sanskrit itself, which I wouldn't be surprised, because a lot of the developers had teachings in Buddhism and Confucianism and whatnot, and so it's very well possible. One of the other things to remember is that during the Yuan dynasty, there was a lot of Mongolization of Korea. So there's Mongols actually came, married into the ethnic Koreans at the time, and I'm a lot of the Koreans, including myself, we're Mongol descendants as well. And so you look at the Mongolian language and the Tibetan language, right? There's a lot of similarities there, because where did Tibetan language originate from, right? At least the script of it. It actually originated from Sanskrit, right? So in a sense, I'll tell you this. The masala, I see this. There was a bowl of masala in India, right? Which somehow just and a huge wind came and just blew it all over the world. And some of them ended up trickling in Thailand, Korea, or Japan and China in itself. And so, that you'll even though you might not see the entirety of it, you'll at least have a bit of a taste of it if you do your research. So thank you for pointing that out, and I think that's a great example of it.
Thank you so much. And Sehun, a parting thought. When I was traveling to Japan, one time I was at Narita International, waiting for the immigration, and then there was a flutter. All the officials became very respectful, and then I saw two lines to my right was a well-dressed family, and the ladies wore what I would call very close to saris. The men wore robes, and the ladies were actually having a dot. I mean, what you call as kumkum, right? She was having that, and they were like accorded like royalty. And I knew it was not the king because I have seen the pictures of the king and the prince and so on. It was not the king. Then I was standing in the line, and I was talking to the guy in front of me, and who are they? He said, "Oh, this is the royal priestly class. They were the priestly family." And the reverence with which they were treated, mind blowing. I mean, you don't see them come out much. Maybe they are available. You can see them in Kyoto, which is where the religious heritage of Japan exists. But in Tokyo, it was like a very interesting experience. Also, last question for you. When the United States went into Japan in 1945, and they did a lot of what I would call a standardization. One of the things that they did was the Japanese language is a very complicated language. We know all that, katakana and all that stuff. You can learn, you can spend a lifetime understanding the different versions of there are 3 different flavors and so on. So what the Americans did was they made the newspapers, for example, periodicals, all go from left to right. Whereas even today, if you buy a book, like a storybook or a fiction, the thing goes vertical. Right? How is it in Korea? I'm just curious.
You can still see that, but a lot of it has been standardized where we read from left to right already. I don't think you'll see a lot of younger generation, unfortunately, opting to the top to bottom option. But when I was a kid, there were so many books like that still, and I'm really glad that I was a generation who was able to experience something like that. So if anything, I would highly recommend everybody to answer the previous questions as well, to really take that first leap of faith, like Queen Suriratna, and really do your research and do your best to explore into this. And plus, and at the end, as you may see in the story, there is going to be a great surprise waiting for you, something that was completely unexpected. And I think that's a beautiful way to wrap up this talk, where this story of Queen Suriratna is a huge lesson to us all, that through the eyes of the divine, no matter where we come from, we're all the same. We're all in the need of same spiritual needs, but more importantly, all of us are worth being celebrated. All of us, more importantly, are worth being united, no matter what the cost is. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sehun. And viewers, that was a wonderful trip down memory lane. I'd like Sehun to come back. He's a very, very accomplished man, and we'll be talking about more matters of world with him. And I can't thank you enough, Sehun. This was a wonderful experience. We tried to do it a week ahead, but somehow things didn't match. But finally, we got together, and we'll be back with more such conversations with Sehun. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Namaskar.